All right, let's get back into the Rite of Spring. Today we have made it all the way to spring rounds. So this is the first kind of slow movement. The introduction is sort of slow, and then after the introduction we have two fast movements, and then after that we get spring rounds, which is the first really slow movement. Okay, I found it. Excellent. Here we go. I'm so prepared. Let's dive right into it. So we can tell that, again, he's featuring the same awkward, kind of weird winds as principal solo material. So it's B-flat clarinet and then E-flat clarinet. And they're playing in what looks, at first, when you glance at the score, appears to be octaves, but it's probably not octaves. So B-flat clarinet is playing in E-flat, and the E-flat clarinet is playing in E-flat. It is octaves. Excellent. That's nice. So primary material is obviously in these two clarinets. To create some sense of cohesion between these two themes, or between really all the themes in this movement, these fast grace note figures have been used throughout by Stravinsky. On top of this, we have this trill figure. I assume it's trilling between an E-flat and F. It is between an E-flat and an F. And the alto flute, which transposes down a fourth, is also doing a trill on E-flat and F. So it's flutes doing trills, E-flat clarinets doing principal melodic material. That passage was easy. I think this is the fastest system that there's been so far in this piece. So let's just quickly listen to that, and then we'll move on. So this is the beginning of spring rounds. It's actually really beautiful. It has a sort of pastoral sound, this interesting background, and then a melody on top of it. I'm going to quickly go through and just analyze the melody. I want to make sure that I'm really understanding exactly the pitch material that he's using. So it's a pentatonic scale. So I've been starting to label now these collections like this. So I'll put like pent beside it just so that we know, like, okay, yeah, it's a pentatonic collection. That makes sense from what he's been doing so far. He's been using a lot of modes and not really going for like traditional types of European pitch collections, like diatonic materials, that sort of thing. Oh yeah, this section is awesome. So we have this brief interlude here at the beginning, which kind of allows us to calm down. Tranquillo allows us to calm down. Then this is this awesome boom bum 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 bum. I think it's this section. Let's hear. So we'll continue through. I guess I can move on from this material. Fast forward. Let's listen, and then we'll analyze. This material really goes on for so long. It's actually very interesting as a composer. You write this one little line of music and you're like, ah, yes, I've got like 45 more seconds of music. And then you write like one system like this at a fast speed and it goes by like that. And you're like, oh, that was a lot of work to produce like 3 seconds of music. So fast music tends to be actually like more work intensive to write. It's why a lot of young composers or a lot of new contemporary composers write a lot of slow music. I definitely fell victim to that when I was writing music. This is not the fast section I thought it was. I love this section though. This section has the feel almost of a funeral march. Boom, bum, bum, bum. I did analysis of this when I was a kid because I like this section so much. So we have low strings on these E-flats with bassoons. Very standard orchestration. And then we actually have our bass clarinets, and these are B bass clarinets. So and then So stacked fifth chord in the strings. We have E flat, B flat, F. And this is low violins. He's also offset everything. And he's put the G flat, so the third of the chord. So we have the G flat, B flat, F in the upper voice. And then we have the low voice underneath that. At the same time, we have this little ascending line here in pizzicati. Right here. I'm going to not circle that in a second. I'm going to uncircle it. And it's also doubled here with the clarinets. So the clarinets are producing low clarinets, very low clarinets. And that's going to be on... parallel fifths. So the texture is low E flats, and then walking up a fourth, up a perfect fourth, at the same time as this material on top. I think I'm missing some flats there. Yeah. So. It's really cool. I really like this section. All of that is creating what I would call, it feels very much like an accompanimental texture. I'm just going to circle it all in yellow. Or maybe I'll specify. I'm going to listen to it one more time. What do you guys think what does everyone think that the principal material is here? Obviously not here. Here. It's really hard to tell. It all feels like one big gesture. And then Stravinsky is going to alternate back and forth between it. So maybe I can circle it all as primary material, but nothing really sticks out. I'm going to just put it as like accompaniment. This is the kind of texture that I would personally want to write as an accompaniment texture. It would be awesome to have this with some kind of like lyrical solo on top of it. From my perspective. So maybe when I'm going through and writing my like small little examples that are supposed to evoke Stravinsky, I'll choose to use it in that way. So it feels like an accompanimental texture. And then we have this little melodic fragment on top. Interesting. It's a very interesting melodic fragment. And underneath that, we have sustaining in here are these horns. These horns are very, very obviously the accompanimental gesture in that section. No, those aren't horns. Those are strings. Those are violins. What am I doing? These are horns. There are horns there, though. So they sustain through. And then there's this melodic material on top. I'm going to pick that apart, figure out what's going on there. Okay. It's like E flat major. And then the chord in the violins is this. Great. It's kind of like E flat 7, but not really. It's like a E9, but inverted underneath with a B. Oh, that's bass clef. That is bass clef horn. That is really low. E. Okay, so it's like an E flat. The harmony here is like an E flat. What is my software doing? E flat 9. He doesn't have the fifth. He leaves the fifth out and he lets the oboe give the fifth so that no one else is giving the fifth. This all kind of just sums together to be the primary motivic material. The first bassoon here is playing 2 octaves below the principal oboe. This orchestration actually really well supports these 2 instruments from overtones. And then in the center we have clarinets just kind of filling in some harmonic filler in there. Just all these other notes that we want. Such a cool section. Oh my gosh, so cool. I love it. It's really weird. So that happens, then it goes back to the other material, and then it's going to repeat again. Basically the exact same material. So to get away from our dependence on technology, Stravinsky, when he repeats, he only repeats for 2 bars instead of 3 to just throw things off a little bit, which is really nice. And then when he comes back to this melodic material, the melodic material spills over onto the next page into a longer phrase. So you can see that here. Longer. And then we come back to our original idea here. This idea this time is supplemented with some more horns. Oh, wait a second. So, does everyone recognize that? Pause the video if you don't recognize that right now, and go and listen to the piece to this point. It'll only take you 8 minutes, and it's a good exercise. That material, I'm going to spoil it now. That material is the trumpet material that was playing during I believe the introduction movement, or maybe the second, maybe it's the dance. No, I'm pretty sure it's the introduction. When everything gets really chaotic, the trumpets come in and play this material. Now it's here. So he sets up. What I was saying before is I would probably set this texture up and then put a line on top of it. Stravinsky does exactly that. So he set it up before as a texture that we are experiencing, and it's just by itself. And then here, he's going to put other instruments with it. So right here, we have principal material here in flutes, and it looks like violas and second violins. Principal material. It's thirds. The flutes are not playing thirds. So the bottom player is playing B. Nice. A little bit of distance in there. Minor second between the G flat and F. Yeah, so he has the exact same chord down here in the strings. It's 4 solo violas. So 4 solo violas plus flutes, it's going to create a really weird sound because he's not getting the chorus effect from his strings, which he would if he just got it like divided into 2 sections and then put them on that part. Instead, soloists going to give a little bit more of a like raw kind of folky sound. And then this main melodic material is going to go into the horns, and the flutes are going to support in the second bar for the rising material. This accompanimental material is keeping the exact same orchestration. So the heavy notes for cello, bass, and bassoons to give that heaviness in the sound. The moving lines for upper cello and the viola section. And then solos in winds and horns and solo strings. Let's listen to this now. I love this section. This section is so good. Oh, I'm getting so pumped up by this section. So this is the second before we move over onto this page. It's extended this time. Okay, so here where we land, we're starting right here with this material now. Those solo violas have such a strange sound. Like, solo viola, yeah, it's a strange instrument. It's just because like the physics of the instrument don't really work out. A violin is built in proportion to the strings, whereas like the viola is like, it would be slightly too big to hold like this if you built it proportionate to its strings. So they build it slightly smaller, I believe. I believe that's what it is. And then because of that, it gets weird like harmonic series and stuff like that. So the viola is a great instrument if you want to capture a little bit more unconventional sound versus putting it in for violins. It's probably why Stravinsky here decides to put it in to the violas. So let's really appreciate that viola and flute sound, and then it's going to go back to the horns. I circled the horns there because I think the horns are playing the primary material, and if I was going to go back to the previous section here, I think that very clearly he's trying to signal that this is the most important material. And that makes a lot of sense because violins are playing it. If you give something to the violins, it's going to sound like that's the most important material in the orchestra. Okay. I don't know if you could tell when the flutes came in, they added kind of a breathiness to the sound of those horns. As the horns rise up, there's this breathiness and a little bit of a thickening of the texture. It's actually very beautiful. That's a good orchestrational tip to grab from this. Don't just put the flutes in right from the beginning. When you want to open up the brass sound a little bit of those horns, add the flutes in after. Again, the flutes are in a register where they're just going to blend and get covered up, but it adds that little bit of breathiness to the sound. So flutes and horns continue with primary material here. Then the horns discontinue. And then it appears that the flutes and the violas, again, take primary material. This time we have to, I think that what's happening here, the piccolo and the E-flat clarinet are playing a secondary line. This is supposed to embellish the other material. Now, if we remember back to our previous section where we had materials like this, I did struggle to talk about a violin part that had come in. It was in first violins, and the first violins were playing this part. Trill, and then descending motion in a triplet, and then trill again, and then ascending motion. Now this material is sort of brought more to the mid-ground texture where we're actually going to hear it. I'm not going to waste time right now going back to find it, but you'll probably remember if you've been watching this whole series that was previously introduced in the texture. So I think that why I really like to bring that up is because it tends to be the case when we're looking at music by really, really, really fine composers that everything is somehow connected. So they don't just add in something because they want something new at some point. It's like that motive was planted earlier, like the seeds for that were planted earlier. And then when they bring it to the forefront, it might sound like it's new to us now because we didn't hear it last time or we weren't quite focusing, but the material was seeded somewhere else in the piece. Yeah, fantastic writing by Stravinsky. Everything else is background texture. Again, bass drum also adding to that low, dark sound at the beginning of each of these bars. So let's hear this again. I'm listening specifically now for E-flat clarinet and piccolo. That's going to be the thing to listen for. The nice thing about this line is how it contrapuntally works. So they all come in together and there's trills. Because the other line isn't really moving anywhere, we hear mostly the trills, and then we hear this little this scale fragment down to the next trill. Then the other line picks up motion and moves up and moves back down, and the first and the secondary line stays static. So if I was I'm gonna go through actually with another color. I'll go through with like a light green or something. It's gonna look terrible, all these colors. But it's like our attention is focused on this material here, and then our attention gets pulled down to this material because this material is moving faster. And then our attention gets pulled up to this material because it's moving faster, and then it lands on a trill, goes back down here, then up here to a trill, and then back down here to this. So you can actually see rhythmically how all of these gestures fit in. When the first idea, ba, 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 is repeating a pitch, not moving anywhere, the other material has something interesting. Then when that material on the bottom starts to move up and down, the other material just stays static on a trill. Wonderful contrapuntal writing from Stravinsky. That's a masterclass right there in counterpoint. Let's continue to listen to that. This section is so heavy. Now, the reason I think that this section gets that bigger sound is because now we have almost all of the strings coming in together and big down bows. Da, da, da. So, principal material. Probably going to call it this upper voice here. I know it's technically like all of this. And then everything else is accompanimental. This moving kind of ostinato figure in the background. Primary material there. And then we're doing basically the same section that we did at the beginning of this movement. So same melodic materials. We're kind of alternating back and forth between like his key signature is, it throws me off a little bit. This is the key signature for D flat major. So this is suggesting E Dorian or E flat Dorian. So that would be, with a C natural. It is E flat Dorian because that's the parallel fifths. They spill out that Dorian. If it would be this. That would be E minor. But in this case, I don't think he wants the tritone. He wants parallel fifths, and so because of that, he's working in E Dorian, E flat Dorian, and then he switches from E flat Dorian to like a E mixolydian right here. So this is like I'll just write E, or write it here. Doesn't matter. E flat Dorian, and then this is E flat mixolydian. And he switches there just by changing the quality of the third. So it's like it goes into the upper voices and the quality of the third changes, and then he brings it into the lower voices again. Yeah, it's pretty cool actually. How just changing one note can change the key. Because mixolydian and Dorian are actually very closely related keys. The only difference between those two is the third. So primary material here. The winds, and the primary material goes back here into the strings, and then the primary material goes back here into the winds. We've heard all this before. Now, the next section here, when the whole string orchestra comes in, this big tutti has a really impressive sound. So I want to go through in detail and analyze each one of these chords. I'm just gonna like go a few seconds further forward. Okay, this is the E mixolydian. Okay, we're approaching it. This music is so slow. Okay. This gets the stamp of my approval. I love this. This is such a great climax. I love the moment in here when he has the brass do the yada. This moment right here is so impactful. Now, I'm pretty sure all he's going to be doing is sliding. So what he's doing is he's sliding down with I think it's a seventh chord. E transposes up to this. No, it's just a major chord. Is that a D flat? Na. It appears that it slides down from a G flat major chord to an E flat or an E chord. But he writes F flat like a crazy person. I'm going to have to analyze that chord in a second. I want to get through the first initial analysis of this whole section. So he's probably, if I was going to orchestrate this section and I had these big chords and this texture that I'd already set up, I'd give all my bass instruments the initial hit at the beginning of the bar, mid-range instruments, this like pounding gesture, and then like maybe some weaker instruments, the line that's going up. And he's going to, like, obviously we're going to expand the orchestra up a little bit into the higher range. He actually expands quite far because he adds the piccolos in as well. So he's just like, he's going for that maximum tutti sound. So we have violins. Violin 1 divisi in 4. Oh, because of these chords. It's unison here. He writes unison here. Watch out for those. So unison violins, and then violin 2s are in the third, so they're coupled here. So they're playing the principal material. Underneath that, we have violas. And violas are playing the top line, not the bottom line. So we don't have a doubling of the bottom line, so we just have this. It's like octave and then the third underneath the top octave. So this is all principal melodic material. Obviously, he splits these parts how... Oh, he changes. So he has everyone land on the first beat together. He's also changed the bass note. It's now a B flat instead of an E flat. Cool. I guess maybe the tuba is grabbing... No. Yeah, the tuba is grabbing the low E. So he actually takes the contrabasses off that entirely. It's an interesting choice. So that's accompanimental material. All of it down here. And then we have tam-tam at the beginning of each bar, bass drum, and timpani. Huge percussion. Tuba hits just the first note. Tuba really stands out in musical textures when you use it, so you have to be very careful not to overuse the tuba. That's one of the basic mistakes that you can make early on. It's just like using too much tuba. There's like a Dvorak symphony where the tuba plays like 6 notes. So you gotta be conservative with your use of the tuba. These are all playing accompanimental figures. The bassoons and bass clarinets are on low material. And it appears then that all of the winds are playing the primary melodic material. So we have the flutes and the piccolos that are playing melodic material. 2 flutes coupled with 2 piccolos unison on top, an octave above. We have the bass flute, not bass flute, alto flute. We have the alto flute, which is on the top line, but an octave below the regular flutes. We have these oboes that are just playing they're just playing chords. All right, we're going to deal with you guys later. Thanks. You guys are not helpful. And then we have clarinets, which are also doing the same thing that the flutes are doing. So clarinets have piccolo clarinet top line, B flat clarinet there, and then another clarinet below that. So the same spacing. 6th, 3rd on top. It's a good spacing, works really well. Like this and like this. So there's not actually a lot going on from an orchestrational perspective here. Everything is like what you would expect. Flutes and clarinets kind of sharing the same register in a big tutti section. That makes a lot of sense. In this case, oboes are like competing with that register. They're like right on top. All right, fine. I think that's not going to be... You're not going to be overpowered by the sound of the oboes just because you actually have all the horns playing this melodic material as well. So you have 2 horns on top playing the melodic material. Key to note is the absence of the trumpets. And the absence of the trumpets, I think, is entirely because they're about to play an incredibly pivotal role at the end of each one of these phrases. So you got to leave the trumpets out so that the listener is getting prepped for their huge rips at the end of each one of these sections. Awesome. Then the bassoon, the oboes, they're playing like this B flat major chord. And then it slides down to this thing. It's a diminished chord with a major 7th. It's very cool. It becomes very dissonant. I'm not sure what to call that. I'm just going to circle that with a brown. This seems very interesting to me. If I had to spend a lot of time on, and then the horns are also doing that. Ah, this thing is the chaos. Look at what these oboes, these guys are doing. It's the chaos that then actually gets met by the trumpets. So it's like almost like he's eroding the harmonic framework that's been set up this entire time. Everyone else is just playing this ostinato figure that we've got very used to, and then in the background, Stravinsky just like pulls the like rug out from under the harmony. Everything is just like collapsing in on itself almost. It's like a star collapsing into a black hole. It's just like he's pulling this texture apart. Violins getting into their really singing register. I want to specifically go in now and take apart these trumpet notes, and then we're going to listen to it because this is super impressive. So it's always nice to be able to see the transposition when doing this. Haha, there we go. Okay, so piccolo trumpet is playing an F sharp. Everyone else is playing the G flat major chord. But on the bottom of this, we have an E. So it's like an E minor 7 chord. And then underneath that, in this lovely tenor clef, G flat, B flat. That's all expected. But the G natural down here is mean. Okay, so he has a G natural and then an F natural in the lowest lowest trombone. G natural, F natural. That's key to note because he has an E flat 7 over top, and then that E flat 7 goes down to a D flat minor 7. So it slides like that, but on top, really crunchy. Again, this is this idea of the split chord tone. So we have here we have the G natural, and up here we have the G flat. And then we again here have the F and this. And it's the third that's split. So he's again using the same harmonic vocabulary that he's been using this entire time, up until this point. Let's listen to that. Yes! That's gotta be one of the best moments. Just, it's like, oh, it's so good. And then immediately after that, we have the tam-tam and everything comes back in. That's in the timpani. And then bass drum and tam-tam, everyone comes back in. Let's quickly look at the rhythm, because the rhythm is neat in this section. So it's 4/4, and it's very well established 4/4. And then he gets to a bar of 5/4, and the 5/4 bar allows him to insert that trumpet idea in at the end of the measure. It's a bomb. Yeah. Neat. Then it appears that he wants to increase tension now in the rest of the orchestra. So he's got these sforzandos on the next one bar over now. Lots of sforzandos. And he's also reintroducing the trumpets. And so the trumpets come in earlier this time and they lead towards this huge gesture. Oops. And we need the piccolo trumpet. I still think in this section that the material is this is kind of primary material because we've been hearing it as primary material this entire time. So we're still going to hear that as primary material, and then everyone else is supporting in some way. So we have these 4-note chords on the inside. I'd love to go through and break all those down at some point. Maybe I should just do it now. We got lots of time. I don't know how close I am to the end of this section. Vivo. We're going to get some fast music. So I'm pretty close to the end of this section. I think I've decoded the orchestration of this section. It's a very simple orchestration. Trumpets are creating this those rip gestures. Then you've got upper winds and upper strings creating melodic material. Everyone else is on lower material supporting. in the center we have oboes and horns, and those are creating these they're creating this like chord descent. Let's just like quickly look at those chords. So the first two are B flat major, and then B flat diminished with a major seventh. And then it goes to, slides up chromatically. So B flat, major seven, B flat diminished major seven, and then B natural diminished major seven, and then A minor, no, A diminished. He's sliding, he's just using these chords parallel. Okay, he's using those chords that diminished major seven, which is a chord, which is like a seventh chord that doesn't get used a lot. So diminished major seven, and he's just sliding it around parallel. There might actually be better description for this chord. If there was an F, okay, is there an F sharp somewhere? I don't think he's going to give it to me to make the analysis nice. Let's look up here. F sharp? No, you're not going to give me an F sharp, are you, Stravinsky? I guess there's G flats. There's like a G flat in the key signature. So horns have, no, they have a G natural. It transposes anyways. I guess they have a G flat in the bar before that. The reason I'm saying that is this could also be thought of this, it's a diminished chord with a major seventh. So if you bring the major seventh down an octave, you have B flat and B natural right beside each other, and then D, F. So B, D, F. And if you put a G underneath that, you now have a G7 chord with a split third as the chord tone. And so that's what I'm wondering, because Stravinsky tends to orchestrate his chords like this, where he'll put the dominant seventh chord on the bottom of the chord, and then the minor third above it, an octave above the regular third. So it's a seventh apart, major seventh apart. So for me, this chord here feels like a derivation of that initial split third sonority that was in the second movement. So he's just taken that idea that he had before. This chord is sort of the germinating chord for the entire piece, and he's used that here harmonically, and he's just sliding it down parallel. He kind of works between bars, he moves chromatically, and then within the bar, he's using a whole tone scale to move the chord around. That's cool. Okay, over here, we've got similar stuff continuing. He hasn't really changed the tonality, and that falls in line with what he's doing in most of this piece. In most of this piece, he's not really exploring moving through different regions or harmonic regions. He just sits in one harmonic region for a long period of time. Now, I don't know if that is... We might be able to draw some criticism for Stravinsky here, that like maybe he was trying to explore other ideas of music so much that he kind of neglected this idea of music. So maybe there's room in the future and writing music nowadays, or even just looking at music that has already been written, but later than this Stravinsky piece, where composers are migrating around harmonically a little bit more during a passage like this, instead of just staying so fixed in the tonality. However, that sort of through line of a very simple and easy to grasp tonality allows him to explore these interesting chords, this parallel motion, because we have something to hear it in reference to, which is this really static E Dorian, on top of which everything else is heard. So then we can hear those chords and how they're sliding parallel. This interesting trumpet gesture, which has, again, parallelism in chords, chord planing. Yeah. That's basically it for that section. The climax here, obviously, he brings in all the brass. So this moment here, we have everyone, all of the brass, all at once. It's key to note that all of them are playing different pitch material. So like they all are contributing to a giant brass chord. They're not all doubling. That's another mistake that is really easy to fall into. I was falling into this one like a year ago, which is just I want my brass to have this really big brassy sound, and just octaves everywhere, or unison line, right? Because I'm thinking of Mahler, where he has like 12 horns and they all just play one giant line at the beginning of the third symphony, and you're like, whoa, that's awesome. I love that. Probably not the best approach for writing brass to get that really big brass sound. Better for them all to have different notes and to work together. You're going to hear way more overtone content. It's actually probably going to sound louder than if you put just a bunch of people in octaves together. All the overtones line up. Maybe they're out of tune. It sounds out of tune. Whereas if you give them a chord, probably actually going to sound fuller and richer. I want to quickly note here this little wind gesture because it's really cute. So instead of just writing, which would be the thing that we would think we would write, he octave displaces one of the trills. So it gives it this kind of frenetic quality, and then he goes to a different note. So I think that this is really nice writing. It's also a great way to not have someone just do a parallel line. It's like, well, you don't really want to have more pitch material. Well, let's just like have two of the people do this, and there'll be different instruments, and the top instrument can just like jump up the octave. It creates a lot of, like, this gesture itself is very interesting. And it really sets up this vivo very well. It's like we've had this long, slow music that's been slowly building. It feels like it's been a long build towards this huge brass climax where the horns get some of their highest notes up there with the high B flat. The trumpets pull us back down through that kind of like sliding diminished chord. Is that sliding diminished chords? No. Yes. Yes, sliding diminished chords in the brass. I bet the piccolo trumpet has the major seventh on top of each of those. Yep, it does. Aha! So he's sliding these chords around. It just goes into the trumpets at this moment. So there's our sliding chords. I was circling this in brown, so I should circle it in brown. We've also got it here supported by horns. The horns will be playing an octave lower, so trumpets up here, horns underneath. This is a really common orchestration. It's really common for just trumpets, horns, trombones. It's really common. Another orchestration that actually works quite well for brass is trumpets underneath, horn solo on top with trombones underneath. The horn solo can project quite well. That's not going to be as loud. Again, that's not like huge tutti passage like this. Okay. We arrive on a giant orchestral hit. Now, I'm going to analyze this hit because I really like orchestral hits in my music. It's just so nice having the whole orchestra go bam. So good. So we got a timpani hit. We got a tuba that hits the note. Trombones all hit a note, but they all have a giant chord. Trumpets have a chord. Trombones land E, D, E. Trumpets have that. It's a C minor chord. Oh, great. Thanks, Stravinsky. And then underneath it is a C. Oh, it's a C minor chord. And underneath it, I was about to say that there's a C diminished chord. And then I'm like, that's probably not the right analysis because C minor on top of this is we're probably dealing with some kind of polychord right now. So we have G, D. Oof, this is a dense chord. I'm just going to talk for one moment about something that I think is actually important. So my tendency is when I see something like this, it's like a huge chord with a ton of notes, is to just go like, all right, it's really dense chord, and then just move on. But pulling those details out can be really informative to your own compositional practices. So I'm going to actually sit here and pull this chord apart. I'd highly recommend that everyone do this. A good place to start sometimes is the strings, because the strings can give you insight into exactly how the chord is put together. And then you're looking for the right things in all the other transposing instruments that are a little bit hard. So you can see that first violins have a C minor chord, and second violins also have a C minor chord. And it looks like violas also have a C minor chord. That's really useful. And then the basses have a G. And then the cello has an E and a D flat. So that's quite interesting. So this G on the bottom is the same pitch that the tuba has. So this gives me the sensation that he wants to, like, he's trying to present this chord as some kind of inverted sonority. G, E, E flat, and then there's a lot of C. Yeah, so I think it's a C chord with split chord tones. So both major third and a minor third. That would be my brief analysis of it. Now we're going to go through everywhere else and see if this analysis... Oh, sorry, I'm all over the place. This is a D flat. So that's a split root if it's a C chord. So we'd have split root and split third. It appears to be what's happening. G, D. This guy is an E natural. No, yeah, that guy's an E natural. That guy is G natural, C, E flat, G, and then these transposed by fifth. So G, C sharp, E, G, G, C sharp, G. The horns are doubling. This is the same as this. Trombones on, trumpets on top. So trumpets, horns again. It's good to, it's sometimes nice to make a little diagram of how a composer has orchestrated a chord. So the horns are kind of mid-range. They're right here. And then above that we have trumpets. There. Underneath this we have trombones. So trombones are an octave lower. Are an octave lower, playing the same chord that the horns played, with the trumpets playing an octave higher. And then let's see what he does with his winds. So bassoons are right at the same register that the horns are at. And then clarinets, oboes, and flutes are an octave higher than the trumpets. Really common orchestration. So all of our winds, we're going to place them up higher, and then we'll have our trumpets underneath the winds. So winds as high as possible, upper winds, trumpets, horns, trombones, like that. And then strings are going to basically try and take as much of that pitch material and just blend it all together. So if we go down and look at our strings, whoops, went too far. If we go down and look at our strings here, you can see that the strings are also quite wide in the register. The contrabass transposes down an octave. The top violin could be higher, but it isn't. It has to move on to other stuff. So you can't have them up way up high and then have them jump down. It's going to be a little bit less accurate in terms of pitch and performance, especially when you got these grace notes leading into it. Good. I'm glad I pulled that chord apart. Cool. So we have that, and then we have what I can only assume is accompaniment material as these trills. So again, Stravinsky loving his trills as background material. Obviously the attack is primary material. And then I think that from here, as I remember the piece, we get a bunch of orchestral hits. The orchestral hit kind of becomes the main narrative at this point. Yep, there they are. Bum, bum. So it's this idea from the previous section. And then that idea gets spilled out into these bars here, where it's a bump, 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 just alternating back and forth. That sounds really happy when I play it like that. Only the piccolo part. Ah, yes. This is something to learn from. Stravinsky's use of these arpeggiated figures in the orchestra. He's masterful at this in Firebird, and then obviously it continues here. These gestures produce so much energy. So much energy. It's really impressive how much energy they produce. So it looks like he's sticking with the same chord and almost identical orchestration of that chord. He's moved his trumpets up a bit higher for each one of these hits, and I think that's going to create a little bit more... it's going to create more urgency to the sound. They also have a B natural. So we're really getting some crunchy stuff. It's like a C minor, major 7. But I know we also have the C major sound in there as well. So it's not worth analyzing a section like this from a foreground background perspective because it's like the strings are playing all this background stuff. Key to note that the background material that the strings have, this kind of arpeggiating figure, is very similar to that arpeggiating figure that we had before when he was trying to create tension. So fourth movement and then second movement, then fourth movement, then second movement. That was the same thing that he was doing before. So that's in here, this idea right here. And it's fast moving stuff. So 16th notes with trills. Trills blurring 16th notes, creating a like propulsive motoric rhythm. And then he just repeats that idea each bar that he wants to, or each rhythmic placement that he wants to create it. So it's here, then it occurs here again. So you can see that he's just, this is the copy paste, but it's not copy paste with the bar line. And the bar line is actually also shifting. Then it'll hit these giant orchestral hits, which are orchestrated as we described before. That's a reason to dig into the first chord. You dig into the first chord and then you look and you see the pattern. You go, every orchestral hit is going to have this orchestration. Winds up high, trumpets, horns, trombones, strings blending the entire thing. Let's look into one of these like arch gestures, these arpeggiated gestures, because I think they're really cool. Stravinsky is going to use, I'm going to switch to a different color. Oh, what color is cool? I like this color. So up here we got piccolo and high oboe and these oboes here. So the oboes are at pitch and they're trilling on this G. So the G is the important pitch here for Stravinsky. It's also the bass pitch for a lot of these chords. So the G is being trilled on, and then at the zenith, I think that's the right word. Hopefully it's the right word. At the peak moment of the arpeggiation, Stravinsky adds in higher trills on oboe and piccolo. So that's an octave above. So we're going to have, I guess, like this trill, and then that trill comes in an octave higher at the arrival moment. So right here you can see that's the highest pitch. That's where he lands his arrival moment. Other than that, everyone is not just playing the entire gesture. And I think the reason that he does that is just it would probably be like pretty hard to like go like jump way up in register. You go from like a low register all the way up into a high register. So instead he just doesn't have the instrumentalists do that. He just has like it's clarinet and then two clarinets at the top, E flat and regular clarinet, and then it comes back down in the original clarinet. So here, original clarinet, one clarinet goes up, two clarinets at the top, one clarinet comes down. I think that is probably going to increase volume at the top part. But if you actually look at the flute parts, he has three parts on this arpeggio the entire time. So two flutes and one clarinet going up, then two clarinets and one flute at the top, and then the same orchestration coming back down. So you can see that, I guess there's two flutes because the top two flutes are a duo. So four people. Yeah, that's correct. Four people. And in this case, the flute is the only instrument that has the entire gesture, and that makes sense because it tends to be considered our nimblest woodwind. The flute is very nimble. It can play very fast stuff. If you want a cool example of really fast flute material, listen to the Harry Potter score that John Williams did for Prisoner of Azkaban. There's some like really nice florid flute parts in that. There's like a scene where a bird is flying around, I think it's maybe the Whomping Willow kills it, but like there's like really fast flute part there. It's quite cool. Okay. This is the gesture that goes bum ba da bum 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 ba da bum bum in these huge orchestral hits here. I'm just going to do a quick preliminary analysis of this. I'm almost out of time for today. So looks like he's maintaining similar orchestration. He's got his winds up very high, bassoons supporting the bass. And then in here, we actually have very high horn. And he has all of the horns together on this da-dum gesture. So it's a B flat, A flat. On that, all of the horns together. And then he divides them into octaves for the next hit. There's going to be a lot of power from those horns there. And so his trumpets, they're not quite as high as they were previously in this chord. He's brought the trumpets down just a little bit lower. Got his tubas in octaves, that's nice, octaves with the bass. And then the strings are playing these non-divisi downbow chords, which is going to give a lot of sound. It's also going to, it's going to give a lot of sound. It's just going to give a lot of sound. You got 3 strings vibrating, boom, boom, yeah. Yeah. And then more of these gestures. So going up, same number of winds. At the top, same number of winds. Coming back down, same number of winds. When you reach the top moment, add a trill. It's really nice. So I think we should listen through this section. I got to find it first. Give me a second. It's probably a couple seconds after whatever I was just listening to. This is a previous section. Yeah, we'll go from here. Winds. Attention. So you can really hear the brass there. Bum, bum. He leaves the brass out for these gestures. And those arpeggiations on top are adding to that like kinetic energy of the strings. Horns. You can really hear this like it's a film score horn sound when you have a whole bunch of horns all together. Bum ba da da da. So da 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 da. That's the horns. It's really neat. And then we get more of this on the next page. It's key to note that the violins are also playing a trill there with the oboes. They're kind of blending the sound. I tend to think of my strings when I'm orchestrating like this giant, like it's like a blender. Just like you put in all the instruments and then the strings are the thing that like whirs them all up and makes them smooth. Whereas when you listen to like a concert band play, it's like you can tell that there's tuning issues. Even the best concert bands in the world, it's like, whoa, this is something is not being blended and smoothed out. There's a little bit more edginess to the sound. It's not an insult to concert bands. It just is a fact. Orchestras tend to have a more like blended chorus effect kind of sound, whereas concert bands have less of that. And then we're going to arrive here. So after this big section where there are these rhythmic articulations and these arpeggios with a lot of frenetic energy in the strings, we're then going to arrive back here after one of these, another giant orchestral hit, and we're going to have the initial melodic material that we had at the beginning section of the piece. So he's come full circle. So if you had to do a quick analysis of the form of this spring rounds movement, you have your introductory section, which is quiet clarinets. Then after that, we go to that like funeral marchy kind of section, sets up an ostinato and goes through that. And develops that, expands it, makes it tutti. Then after that, we have this section with a lot of energy with orchestral hits which kind of feel like they develop out of the slow section. And then we return back to the initial gesture, which is this pentatonic gesture that has trills above it. And that's it. Ritual of Two Rival Tribes is next. I'm going to quickly go and find this ending section because he does change one key thing here at the end. Oh, missed it. Oh, I missed it again. I'm the worst. Okay, here we go. It's actually weirder this time. I think last time it had a regular flute. Let's go back and see, and this will be the end. Okay. First time. E-flat clarinet and regular clarinet in octaves. Much simpler sound. The last time, he's actually got E-flat clarinet and alto flute, but they're separated by 2 octaves, or like this. So there's a part that's missing in the middle. So they don't blend very well together. So it's almost like at the beginning, it was something that was a little bit more idealistic and easy and simpler. And then here it's become somehow strained. There's a little bit more strain in the music because things are pulled apart. Okay, so I made it to about 12 minutes into this piece. I'm doing pretty well overall. I've got 22 minutes left to do. So hoping to get through the first part sometime this week, and then we'll start on the second part and hopefully get to the sacrificial dance, because I'm super excited about that section. Thanks for watching. Leave comments in the comments section below, and I'll see you in the next video.